Alex is going to give us a rundown on the Joburg water situation and why boreholes have become so popular. So tell us, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for chatting to me. It's a very strange place we find ourselves in at the moment in Joburg. Joburg has huge infrastructural problems at the moment, and we see it every day. Maintenance issues in Joburg at the moment. There's 12,000 kilometers of pipes around Joburg that are 60% behind on maintenance. They pass their useful life. So we're seeing increased demand at the moment for water municipal backup systems as well as borehole systems.
Do we really need help with water?
At the moment, there is, going back to the infrastructural problems, as I mentioned, there's the infrastructure is hugely under-maintained at the moment, and I don't think the rain has an effect on that at this point, because it is about, while there's a lot of water around in Joburg, it's about getting them to the houses and to the businesses, which is the real challenge.
So it's not so much about watering the garden and filling up the pool?
No, definitely not.
The company Spritza, you do start to finish, turnkey, one-stop, everything, the whole lot?
Yes, indeed. We started as a borehole company. Originally started as part of a mining company, so we were an exploration drilling company that realized the need, so we were good at drilling holes. We drilled some big holes in our lives, and that's a good start for boreholes. And that's where the whole solution starts. Getting the borehole right is the first step in the process, but if you get it wrong, that's where it affects the filters long term, how much filtration you need, and all those things. So it is important that you get the hole right from day one. Yeah.
And starting from the beginning, legislation now requires an application that has to be submitted to the municipality.
Yes, it is quite a process, but we see that it has improved quite a bit in recent weeks. It is getting easier to submit the applications. It is still a long-winded process, but if you get all the documentation in timelessly and you've got it all available, that's one of the challenges that we find, is that the information that is required for the application isn't readily available. So it ends up slowing the process down and getting the application in.
And no more drilling through the Gautrain tunnel?
No, definitely not.
You start with the
the geological surveys are done, generally we use magnetic surveys, and the misconception very often is that you're not actually looking for water, you're looking for geological breaks or formation changes which would carry water. So the water runs between the rocks, so the fallacy of looking actually for water, you cannot really tell if there's water down there. You're looking for the best places where water would generally run between the rocks. Yeah.
This is an installation you've recently completed. Can you fill us in on what the installation includes and why it was done and what it does?
So the client was having huge challenges with water outages in the area, and that's been increasing. Basically, they contacted us and said, listen, we need more reliable sources of water, and the first phase in the process was coming and doing a water sample, taking a water sample, which took about 2 weeks.
From the existing installation?
From the existing, and actually this wasn't here either. In actual fact, it was straight from the borehole. And we took a sample straight from the borehole and sent it away to a laboratory to do a test. We get a comprehensive result, and we analyzed it and put together a bank of filters, which we then spec'd for them.
And a laboratory test, does that need to be done frequently, or is once good enough to get started, or does the filter then take care?
Well, the filters are very specific to the water sample, so it is important to have the filters spec'd specifically to the water sample. However, we must bear in mind that borehole water is coming from generally quite deep down, so it takes a time for that water to change. So 100 meters up, we always say that water at that depth takes a long time to change drastically, so it's difficult for pollution to get down there, E. coli. So if a sample is taken at a point in time, it takes a fair amount of time for that sample to change. Joburg is 140 years old. The water samples that we're picking up from there is progression of that pollution and stuff that's got down there eventually. But it hasn't happened yesterday,
The filters that are installed, what do they eliminate?
So we picked up that there was high turbidity and sediment in the water. So we put a glass filter, which is the first step in the process, which removes all the sediment and the turbidity. It is an automated system that backwashes at a set time during the night, so it doesn't affect the water at that time. So there's a softening unit in place which addresses the hardness of the water. So when you wash your hair and you put soap in it, it doesn't lather, that kind of thing. So that very hard water would generally have that problem. And then the salt for the regeneration of the resin in the filter. Then it goes through a UV system and to a 1 micron and a carbon filter, as well as cellulose balls, which then coat the pipes and protect against corrosion. Yeah, and I think right at the end there's a little scale stop unit that stops that scaling of the water. water, that white marks that you might get on windows and stuff.
And do you filter every single litre, or is there a separate tap for garden and a separate
So
tap
we
for...
definitely always separate the water. The garden water is separated, and only the household water for potable water would go through the filtration.
And the taste of borehole water versus City of Joburg water?
Yeah, so I mean, we all went to farms when we were younger, and you drink that straight borehole water. So generally speaking, this water, because of the filtration, is a lot more palatable. There is a different taste. I mean, we don't have chlorine in this water, so generally that chlorine is removed. It is a lot better than the general old straight borehole water, but it definitely is different to Joburg municipal water.
And a pH count on Joburg water versus borehole?
So what we found is in most of the water in Joburg, there's generally hard, and its pH is low, which means it's slightly acidic. So you've got to generally balance it with a pH balancing unit, or putting silifos balls in, which would coat the pipes and protect against corrosion. But those are the general trends. We have started to see nitrates in the water, which is from fertilizers and things like that.
You don't want that.
You don't want that. So anything above 12 nitrates, it can be very harmful for human consumption, and they're quite tricky to treat because there is a resin that you can use to treat it, or via reverse osmosis. The reverse osmosis systems, however, waste water.
Why is that?
It just pushes a lot of, so there's a waste pipe and a clean water pipe. As it's going through that membrane, it pushes all the pollutants down one way, and clean water is directed through into the taps.
Choose the location for where to drill the hole. In the old days, it used to be where the rig could fit, so it was always in the driveway.
Yes. Generally speaking, it's still very similar. When we do a survey, the first thing is access that you look for, because even if the survey shows that there's water under the house, there's very few people who have a borehole in their living room. So the hydrogeological survey is how we would establish where the borehole would be situated, and then depth and the casing and all those kind of things that come into play as well, which are quite big processes during the drilling, are determined by the overburden on the top. So the casing would be the
loose soil.
The loose soil, you've got to case that off to make sure. There's a lot of shortcuts being taken in Joburg where people drill boreholes and they basically put a PVC pipe down, but that doesn't stop the overburden from going down the hole. And then you drill down to basically the hard rock, and once it reaches the hard rock, you case off into that hard rock to stop all that overburden from coming in, and then you would drill down in the center of that through the hard rock until you hit an aquifer or a water source. Now, determining the depth of the borehole is also in the survey that you receive, and that very clearly gives you a minimum and maximum. And otherwise, like we were talking earlier, otherwise it ends up like a gold rush.
When I drilled 20 years ago, I had to upgrade my electricity because a 100-meter column of water needed a really strong pump. With solar these days, can solar run a borehole pump?
They definitely can. Obviously, the technology's come a long way. You can see all the water heads and things that have come along, but the pumps have also come a long way. They're very good for solar. They're solar efficient. They variable speed pumps on the booster pumps and stuff like that. And the borehole pumps are very efficient. They pump out a huge quantity of water, generally speaking, very, very quickly. So filling a tank like this is quite a quick process.
So the pump doesn't work every time you open a tap inside. There's a reserve up here.
So a lot of people don't know this. The borehole pump actually goes down the borehole. A lot of people don't know that. And that pumps from the bottom of the borehole into your tank. And then your booster pump comes on only when a tap comes on. Like this pump here, this is a variable speed pump. So what it does is, as you turn on a tap, even half a tap, the RPM is set at a level where it will only come on to that level that is required.
That's to help with mixer taps.
Yes, mixer taps, and with efficiency. Yeah. So they're going to last a lot longer, generally speaking, and use less electrical consumption.
What are the 5 points that you'd offer for getting started, and what happens next?
The first thing is that you need approval from council to drill a borehole.
And that's a couple of weeks? Or?
That is quite a process, and it can take a couple of weeks. It is very often of how readily available your documents are that you need to submit. We help facilitate that process, and we've seen an improvement in that process. The other thing is that the borehole pump very often has to go down the borehole. Very often people think that there's a pipe that goes down the borehole and you suck it out that way. So that's one of the misconceptions that people don't realize, and that the systems are as advanced as you can see here. There's a lot that goes into it, and understanding what you need to do to the water to clean it.
So it's not a one size fits all. You start by finding out at what depth the water is.
Yes.
And then the yield of the water?
Yeah, the yield's very important. Generally speaking, the JHB boreholes are high-yielding boreholes if they're done correctly in the first place. Water, generally a house would use 1,000 to 1,500 litres a day.
So 3 days of water supplied here.
Exactly. So a 200 litre an hour yielding borehole will more than be able to keep up with the average household's consumption. So the lower the yield of a borehole, the bigger the tanks. Even a very low yielding borehole you can make work. And the other thing that's very important to know about boreholes is that over pumping them is actually not a good thing. So you need time for a borehole to recover. We've had many clients before that we've actually gone to do assessments on, and they think, well, we need to drill another borehole. But actually just getting the timing right of how long you pump that borehole for is very important in the process, because pumping it every 10 minutes and pumping it dry is really not good for the borehole, and it won't produce the yields that you need. So you need to get that timing right.
And is that a manual setting, or is that?
It's a lot of, obviously if you do a yield test before the pump is lowered, that's probably the best way of finding out. But you can do those tests yourself by pumping the borehole until it runs dry and then giving it a period to recover and checking how that yield improved by giving it the borehole longer time to recover in between.
Some misconceptions you've come across while meeting clients?
You can really get your municipal bill down to zero consumption on borehole. People can't really believe that and fathom that, because I think the similar thing with the solar, you still need municipality, generally speaking, to feed on cloudy days and that kind of thing. But water, you can truly be off the grid.
You can be 100% self-sufficient.
Yes, you can. So that's a misconception. The other one is the borehole pump goes down to the bottom, and it is really important to get your water analyzed. You can go to Builder's Warehouse and go and buy a 3-phase Big Blue system and put it in, and people think that that's sufficient to.
You wouldn't recommend that?
I wouldn't. I highly not recommend it. Yeah.
If this is phase 1 of an installation, getting the hole and the tank installed, and that is phase 2, do you do them simultaneously? Do you wait for the test results before you spec phase 2?
Yes, so generally speaking, phase 1 would be the survey, the phase 2 would be drilling the actual borehole, phase 3 would be doing a yield test. We recommend doing a yield test. However, if there's obviously enough water, then rather save that money and put it into the filters at the end. Phase 4 would be putting in the infrastructure in, which is the tanks and the pumps and that type of thing, dropping the pump down the borehole, and then running that borehole for a period of time. So normally what we do is we put a tap on where the client can use it either connected to the irrigation or put a tap on and run it into the garden, and that just gets the borehole to settle and find its groove. Once that's done, phase 5 is taking the actual water sample. That can be quite a process, just from a timing to get the lab results back, and then we spec the filters, and that's the final phase, which is phase.
And from start to finish, then a couple of weeks or a couple of months? Or?
No, it's actually, I would say it's a month process to do it properly, but the actual installations, each one of this would probably take, the infrastructure would take 2 days, the drilling would take a day, maybe 2 days, the filtration would take 2 days. So generally speaking, would be on your site for 6 days.
And how long is a piece of string? Is it a 100,000 to 500,000 job, or?
So what we say is from start to get completely off the grid is from 130 to 200,000.
And that can
get you off the grid. Yeah, I mean, it can
pay back over a couple of years. Then that's
yeah. Some of the clients that we've done it happens incredibly quickly. 18-month payback period, because their water bills were significant. Yeah. So what we're also trying to get is to work on the sustainability of this, which is, I think, is an important thing to mention, is that we really try and push the sustainability and not over, just because you've got free water per se, it's actually not free. It's going to catch up with all of us at some stage.
Business must be good right now. Is this a popular trend that people are becoming more self-sustainable and using borehole water?
Absolutely. We've definitely seen an uptake in boreholes, but also municipal backup systems. Not everybody's got the budget immediately to do off-the-grid system. So municipal backup systems are becoming very popular as well.
And it can be staged. You don't have to do everything all in one.
Absolutely. I mean, the municipal backup system is basically one of the phases of the borehole. So this infrastructural system is the same for a municipal backup as it is for a borehole. So piping a borehole in at a later stage is quite a simple process, as well as putting the filtration. So, yeah.
Alex, we're building 8 houses in Bryanston and we have an existing borehole, so we've already reticulated for a small tank in each unit. How popular is borehole water and this sort of setup in a multi-unit development?
Yeah, we've done a number of complexes. So complexes are definitely looking into it. Obviously, the systems are a lot bigger and the filtration is a lot bigger. The businesses, we've seen shopping centres, businesses have also obviously started to look into it and put in systems that support their infrastructure. Yeah.
And you're happy to take on a job no matter how big it is?
Absolutely. The bigger the better. Yeah.
Alex, I would think that having a backup water supply, just like a solar system, adds to the property's value. What other benefit could there be in having an installation like this?
Another misconception that people have around boreholes is that we're not tapping into a completely different water source. It's just at a different point in the cycle. When you put in these filters, it is actually cleaning the water, and subject to us controlling the pollution, which generally households do not pollute water hugely, we're actually cleaning Joburg water as a whole and the entire water system.
And putting less strain on the existing infrastructure.
Absolutely, yeah.